All right, what's up, good people? Welcome to another episode of Pleasant Talks, brought to you by Pleasant Trees, where we talk all things cannabis, culture, and community. I'm your host, Jerome Crawford, Director of Legal and Social Equity. Be sure to check all of our links to like us, follow us, and subscribe to the podcast to stay up on top of all future content. So, no further ado, let's get into it. All right, today's episode, we're going to explore the meaning of social equity. Now, before we get into that, I have the absolute honor and the pleasure of introducing our guest, Anquinette, and let's just call her by what she is known by, Q, Sarfoh, owner of Culture. Q, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. Now, as we know, there's a lot to unpack when we get into social equity. It's a bit of a term of art, if we will, in the cannabis industry, but let's flip it and start on the other end first, because people go, well, what's social equity in cannabis? Let's start with you. Let's talk a bit about your background. Your roots in the cannabis industry we'll dive into in just a minute. But before that, here we are, sitting in Michigan. Have you always called Michigan home? Where are you from originally? Just give us a little bit of background about you.
I have not always called Michigan home. I am from Gary, Indiana, right up the highway. I like to call it Little Detroit. But yeah, I came to Detroit about 12 years ago after all of the Kwame Kilpatrick stuff was going on. So I'm one of the one of the transplants from that. Fox was doing a bit of reshuffling, and I took the place of an anchor who left after all of that. And so, yeah, I was working in Boston at the time, and the news director at Fox here in Detroit called and said, would you consider coming to Detroit? And since it was, 3.5 hours away from home, and my mom and my dad and my nephews or my sister, they're all back in Gary, Indiana. So it was nice to be able to be closer to my family, be a car ride away instead of a plane ride away. And so yeah, here I am. And now even though I'm retired, because I retired about 5 years ago due to multiple sclerosis, and but I decided to stay because I do love it. And they've been Michigan and Detroit in particular have been very good to me.
Wow. And Gary, and for very, very weird reason, holds a special place in my heart. So I go to Chicago pretty often, and for whatever reason, the bathroom break stop always happens in Gary, Indiana. I don't know. It's like my metabolism is like, we're coming through Gary. This has got to stop at that McDonald's right off of
Right.
94. You know the one, right? Like you got to stop at that one. So I feel like I've been to Gary so many times on account of that. And then, of course, I've had some friends from the area as well. So we're happy to have you and happy that you've stayed with us. So you already sort of touched on it a little bit. You have a pretty cool career that we may have seen you from before cannabis. And in fact, cannabis was quote unquote newer for you, if you will. When people go like, oh, you're in that. But people go, we've seen you. So your career in Fox, tell us what that was like, making that transition, being in TV. Everyone assumes, oh, you're a TV star. We see you every day. We wake up with you, right? That type of thing. So tell us about that experience.
It was great. I was one of those weird people who wanted to be a TV journalist from the time I was in second grade.
Yeah.
So in second grade, I looked at the news and said, wow, people get paid to tell stories? And I get to dress up, be on TV, wear nice clothes, and tell stories?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I pursued that career. I was blessed. I had a fantastic career. I got to live in South Bend, West Lafayette, Las Vegas, Boston, and now Detroit. So I got to see bits of the country, got to live in different communities, visit lots of people. I was a producer. I was a reporter. I ended my career as an anchor. So I knocked on doors, got doors slammed in my face a lot. And yeah, but it was, I had a wonderful 20-plus year career. I can't complain.
Wow.
I can't complain. I did not want to leave my career. I was at the pinnacle of my success. And when you're an anchor, I don't want to say it's an easy gig, but oh my gosh, let's just say I was not digging ditches.
Right.
So it was. I enjoyed my career, and I was one of those people who did not have a problem getting up at 4:30 or 3:30 in the morning. But 4 hours of live television every day was stressful.
Yeah.
And so my doctor said, this is not the career for someone with MS, because this stressful career will put you in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So, I took their advice, my doctor's advice, my husband's advice, my mother's advice, my sister's advice. and I said, "No, okay, all right." And I was lucky. I planned. I always tell people this: that no matter where you are in your life, if you can afford
Mm,
long-term disability insurance,
hmm.
buy it. It saved me,
Yeah.
so that I was able to walk away from my career and not have to worry about paying for everything was a blessing. So I was able to walk away from my career, and my neuropsychologist said to me at the time, because they prepare you to leave your job. They say,
Sure.
okay, well,
Sure.
you're only 45 years old, so you're 20 plus years away from your real retirement.
Right.
This is going to be a change for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is going to be different from, you're used to going to the grocery store and saying, hey, can I get a picture? And, just being that person. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden,
You're in the
you're
spotlight
cute,
every day. Right.
right? So now it's like, "Ooh, you're just cute." I've always just been cute, but now you're just cute, which is great. So I'm always shocked when people recognize me now, because
Mm.
when you see me at the grocery store, chances are I'm covered in dog hair, and there's no makeup on. I might have put on lip gloss, but since you've been wearing a mask all year,
Then your mask gets most of the
right?
makeup. I mean,
Exactly. I haven't worn makeup. I barely do my hair. It was a ponytail. So like cute. Like, how do you recognize me? Don't tell anyone you saw me like this. But anyway, yeah, it was a wonderful career,
yeah.
and but yeah, now I'm on to something else. My neuropsychologist said, if you're gonna give up one job, you have to have something to be passionate about, or you're gonna be miserable.
And that's
And
exactly
yeah.
exactly the irony
Hmm.
of, you mentioned not wanting to walk away, right,
Hmm.
from that career path, but how that was a blessing, the transition, right,
Right.
having the necessary insurances, the coverage, right.
Hmm.
But beyond that, it's not like it became a bit of a blessing in disguise because of what it led into your new foray. Now, before we dive into that, though, the irony of what you said about getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So I've got good friends, Josh Land and Everett Academy, really good
Oh,
buddy of mine, and
sweet.
so these guys, I know it's like that morning grind. It's
Hmm.
like, what time you going to sleep? At 8:30.
If
Okay,
oh, Jesus, that's going late.
exactly. I'm like, but he's like, yeah, I need to be out
Hmm.
by 8:30. So, it's a grind. Salute to you all there. And as you mentioned, with the doors being closed, in addition to sort of my legal career, acting background, so I know what it's like, the spirit of rejection. You get to a
Hmm.
point where, and I've actually come to adopt, it's not rejection, it's protection. It just means it
Okay.
wasn't for you. One of my
Right.
acting coaches told me that years ago. But I celebrate you and salute what you've done with your career. That is incredible, and that's
Thank
why I think
you.
we recognize you. Because yes, it's, and I've shared with you offline, of course, my mother recognizing you, who also has MS as well, and that you were such an inspiration for her in your story,
Aw.
and obviously sitting in that anchor seat, which I'm a big B and Mary Jane fan as
Mhm.
well. How can you not be? So you watch being Mary Jane, you know what it's like, and people go like, "Oh, that's the life. What's like being an anchor?" Not digging ditches, maybe not all the
Right.
drama in the background, but not
Right.
digging ditches. But back to that point about that inspiration, right? I mean, your story was well known. Your story, as you made the transition sort of away from the anchor seat, which was for the best thing for your health, and the why, it had a dovetail into the cannabis industry. Tell us
Mhm.
about how you got into the cannabis industry, and then why you decided to stay in.
Right. Well,
And beyond
my
maybe the industry, just how it did something for you, obviously, as
right.
part of
Oh
the
yeah, it's
transition.
been great. um, when I was diagnosed about 8 years ago, I went from taking one medication. I was on Adderall, and I was on Adderall for fatigue, not knowing that I had fatigue because I had MS.
Mhm.
So the Adderall kind of covered the symptoms of MS for a while until I face planted in my kitchen one day.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, I guess the Adderall isn't working anymore. But oh wow, where was I going with this? Let's see. So let's see. Adderall. I totally.
Well, I know
That's
the
what-
Adderall was
yes.
was sort of one of the first things you maybe were
Right.
taking
Oh,
medication
gotcha.
wise,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then that maybe wasn't
Mhm.
working, as you said, just
Right. So
given the
my
results.
my when MS presents itself for me mostly through fatigue and nausea.
Mm.
And I was throwing up a lot, all the time, because I would get stomach spasms. Because MS gives you muscle spasms, and so
Right.
my stomach muscles would spasm, and I would have these fits of throwing up. And so if you 10 times, 11 times, 12
Wow.
times. It's one after another, and your stomach is empty and you're still just retching.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
yeah.
I've got nothing left.
Right.
Stop.
And it's
Right.
incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And so it won't stop. And so my husband would take me to the hospital,
Hmm.
and they would pump me with morphine and muscle relaxants and send me home. And the third trip to the hospital, my husband said, why don't you just smoke a joint? I was like, seriously? And so I'm like, well, you know what? At this point, give me that joint.
At this point, like nothing else is working. Just come on.
Give-
You got one?
give
Can we
me
go
the
pick it up
joint.
now?
Right.
Come on.
So can you call that guy down the street?
Right.
And so I started off with the joint,
Yeah.
and the nausea instantly went away.
Wow.
But what surprised me was that it gave me energy. I did not expect that, and so I was able to wean myself off of 80 milligrams of Adderall,
Oh
and
my
I was up
God.
to 80
I
milligrams of
said, and
Adderall.
80 milligrams is no joke.
It's
I mean,
no joke.
that's
The average dose of Adderall is about 10 to 20 milligrams.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, so that's like
Right.
hyper
Oh
focus,
yeah. It's like,
out the game,
oh yeah.
but again, still not giving you the relief you needed. You
Right.
realize you said, "Hey, this joint." Did you know at the time what type of strain? Like, am I going for a sativa?
Not at
You said,
all.
"I don't know just give it to me.
No, not
Let's
at
try
all.
it."
And because when I noticed that I would get off work I would be at work about 4:30.
Yeah.
I would get off work around 10:30, and I would go home and just go to sleep because I was exhausted.
Sure.
But I would take a puff, and then I would start walking my dogs and mopping the floors. And I
Yeah.
have black wood floors, so they never look clean.
Right.
So,
Every day.
so I was mopping the floors, and I'm like, wow, this gave me energy. And over time, I was able to wean myself from taking 9 medications to taking none. So because once I got diagnosed, they put you on just about everything. And so I went from taking Adderall to taking 9 medications. And over time, and I also changed my diet.
Mhm.
And I was able to get off of all those medications. And I use cannabis and CBD as my primary MS treatment, along with diet and
Yeah.
exercise. So there are ways to do it. And so right now, knock on wood, so far so good. But yeah, so my husband said smoke that joint, and from there I did, and I realized that I came to find out that the strain was Gorilla Glue, and so Gorilla Glue changed everything for me.
Well, and ironically, here we are in 2021. Apparently, it changed everything for this young lady as well with the Gorilla Glue hair
Oh, I
situation.
know.
So, I mean, Gorilla Glue is the gift that keeps giving. It just it's been still giving.
No, don't put it on your
Don't put it
hair.
on your hair, in your joint, sure.
Right.
No, as a strain, of course. But
Right.
so that's changed everything for you, obviously. Now, had you from that point in time again didn't know maybe is this going to help me, not help me? I'll try anything. I'm assuming you began to do a little more research, look around, like, hey, can this be helpful? Had you learned about anybody else maybe in the community that was also suffering from the same condition that said, yeah, this is helping me too?
No, but not in this community, but I read a lot. And in the MS community, 60% of people with MS endorse using cannabis in some. At least they've tried it. A lot of them use it regularly. So the majority of people with MS have at least tried it.
Yeah.
And it's almost common in that community. But, and unfortunately, our government restricts some of the information that's out there. It's hard to find, but there are 25,000 studies on cannabis.
Yes.
And there are lots of studies about cannabis and multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
And it works. So it's helpful, it's beneficial. I'm not saying it's going to cure you. It's not a cure. But if they're giving us treatments,
Yes.
this combined with diet and exercise so far is working for me.
Yeah. And simply put, the proof's in the pudding. The results are there. Your testimony, right, is
Yeah.
something that you're able to share that impacts others. They see your story and go, wow, I mean, no different than you've seen children suffering from seizures, and then they
Right.
try cannabis, and then all of a sudden, wow, that impacts them. Or, athletes and former athletes, pro athletes that say, man, I'm trying to get off these opioids, right? And the crisis that is on, and the addictive nature of that, right? Versus
Right.
healing with that. And you see others in the space right now, such as, Calvin Johnson with the Primitive brand, right? And so you're seeing more individuals that are saying, hey, like, look, this works, and I'm willing to stand the mountaintop and say it, right?
Right.
Because it's almost, in some respects, I'm like, I'm going to come out with my truth that yes, I consume, or yes, I endorse it, right? And it's sort of that authenticity brings people's walls down. Where they go
Right.
like, what? Also, I guess it is okay. And the stigma that around, and we'll get into that in a minute, I think, on the social equity front. But before that, you had such a good experience with it personally, right? You found a way to have your own personal foray into the business side of it. So tell us a little bit about that and how you found your way in the business side of the industry beyond, hey, this is really working for me from a health standpoint. I want to do more.
Right. Well, when I decided to retire, and my neuropsychologist said, you can't you're not going to be happy just at home eating bonbons. You have to find something to do, and something to be passionate about. And I said, well, I have to say that now that I've tried cannabis, we were lied to. We were
We were
so
hoodwinked and bamboozled.
and led
Who told us
astray. right-wing
Who
families
told us these
and led
lies?
astray. Right. And I said, so I think that it's total BS
Yeah.
that people are still locked up for this plant. And now that I try it every day, it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
And it's actually really good. And especially for so many older people came to me. So anyway, and talking to him, I said, well, maybe I'll join legalization, especially because at that time, MI Legalize was fighting for ballot access, and they got denied. And I felt that the way they got denied was so wrong because in Michigan we have constitutional right to do a ballot initiative,
Yes.
and we fulfilled the obligations of that ballot initiative. And they changed the rules mid-campaign.
Oh,
The state
wow.
changed the rules mid-campaign, mid our campaign. And then, so when we went to court, it was too late to do anything. The
Yeah.
judge said, well, this was wrong, but it's too late. And so
Almost
we had
like,
to
too
start
bad,
all
so
over.
sad.
Right.
Try again next time.
Right. And I just felt that was so undemocratic.
Yeah.
And
Undermine the process.
right.
Yeah.
And then there's so many things. And on top of it, civil asset forfeiture was a huge thing for me because at that time we were growing in our basement. And you can't grow under the caregiver model at the time and still be compliant and be within the law.
Right.
So you can grow 12 plants, but once your plants flower, you're instantly over the limit. And so the police at that time, they could come into my home. They can seize not just my plants, but all of my property.
Yes.
Everything. They can just ignore the fact that I had a 20-year career, and they can say everything that was in that house were the proceeds of ill-gotten gains, and they could take everything. And they were doing this to people all over Michigan.
This is the time of the gray market,
Right.
right? Yes.
Right.
Very uncertain.
Right. And so it's civil asset forfeiture to me was just this is just un-American. and what the great thing about it was when people on both sides of the aisle looked at it, because we had Republicans saying to us, cops can do what? That doesn't seem right.
I know.
Right. Exactly, right? So it was those two things. And I said, well, let's I'm gonna dedicate my time to legalization and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so I joined MI Legalize, which turned into the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, which were the people who put out Prop 1.
Yes.
And so we spent a year. I spent a year arguing with preachers, arguing with a lot of preachers in church basements and on radio shows, and trying to get people to see that this is a plant, and yeah, if you have cancer, you can try it. But it shouldn't just be for people who have cancer.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you have a lot of people in our community who don't even want to drink. If they want to use this plant, they should be allowed to do that.
That's right.
Everyone has a vice. And this is, I feel, one of the least harmful vices out there.
Yeah. The irony of it, even because I love that you said it that way, because naturally, cannabis's entry and the way it was able to be, see, it's okay is the medical side, right? What it can do for your benefits. But let's just be honest. There's certain things you just like to do for enjoyment. I mean, we say enjoy, and we say stay pleasant and enjoy pleasantries. And
Right.
like, yes, it's an okay thing to enjoy. And when you think about the things you might enjoy, vices, otherwise, things you consume, this is the one that's probably going to be the least harmful to you.
Right. 'Cause I drink.
I mean, come on, least impact. I mean, not saying don't have that glass of red wine you might want to have every night. Absolutely. I'm right there with you, okay? Old fashioned, whiskey
yeah, me
neat.
too.
Come on now, all
Yes.
day. But when you think about, hey, the impact that actually would have on my body and my liver is still going to be technically over time if I consume that on a regular basis and do the comparative study over 10, 20 years. One's going to do more damage than the other. That's just
Right.
life, right? And so I think it was that sort of dispelling, right, the myths, right, and destigmatizing around the truth about cannabis, which is back to the whole social equity angle. The irony is that a lot of the reason there's so much negative stigma, it really comes from the fact of criminalization. It's the prohibition. When you're told something's bad, not even why it's bad, you're just told
Right.
it's bad, right? And then you have people around you that get in trouble for that thing. Well, it must be bad.
Right.
You're right. It's got to be bad, right? So you criminalize it in such a way, you demonize it to a level where you take away its ability to quote unquote be good, even if it inherently is.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's been kind of, I think, the fun of the unpacking side of it. So you got in the front lines for the fight. Obviously we got to a point of legalization. We've moved it forward. We're there now. You stayed in the industry. I know you've been and still are, I believe, a board member as well, and one of our lead associations. You tell us about that, as well as you having your own ventures as well into it, because you say, "Hey, we're here, we're legal," and you were part of this fight. It's only right you stay in it.
Yes, I was lucky that when I was campaigning for legalization, a business owner saw me on a TV show, and they eventually reached out to me to join their team. They were having a hard time getting licensed in Detroit,
Okay.
and so we started a PR campaign talking about what we wanted to do at that location in Corktown in Detroit, and we were eventually approved, and we opened on Election Day,
Wow.
2018. So the day that recreational or adult use became legalized, our medical facility opened
Awesome.
in Detroit. And that was a great day.
Yeah,
it was great.
incredible.
60% approval rating.
Wow.
So it was mission accomplished.
Yes.
Mission accomplished. But it was. I worked with some great people, and they have been working for 50 plus years.
Wow.
So a lot of people have been in the fight before I was alive.
For
So
sure.
I definitely have to give them their props and their homage.
Yes.
But yeah, so I was so we opened on Election Day. We sold to a multi-state operator about 6 months to a year. About a year later, it took a year for everything to go through. I got into this because I actually wanted to start an edibles line.
Wow.
I even drove to Colorado and trained with a cannabis chef in Colorado, and so that's eventually.
Yeah,
But right
still,
now,
still in play. So,
right? Yes, I mean, it'll happen. It'll happen when it's supposed to happen. I'm not going to worry too much about it. But yeah, so we sold the provisioning center in Detroit to an out-of-state company, and so now I'm a shareholder.
There you go.
And
Congratulations.
thank you.
That's a win. People know
Well,
this in this game. That's the
absolutely,
win.
hey.
Okay. Come on now.
Hey, sell.
Come on now. Absolutely.
And yeah, right now we're building out a project, a 40,000 square foot project in Warren right now. So
Awesome.
we have cultivation and hopefully retail in Warren once
Awesome.
once the legalities
Yes.
and litigation.
Every state's an island. I mean, every I should say every city is
Right,
an island
yeah.
within that. Correct. Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so that's where I am now. And then of course, the CBD line, culture spelt with a Q.
Yes. Yes.
So-
Okay. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about the CBD line and then some of the work maybe you're still doing on the advocacy side, or I'd say even the legislation board work that you do, and then we'll take that dive into social equity from
Okay.
there.
All right. Well, about actually earlier this year, I decided to launch a CBD line. It's the CBD and other cannabinoids line. We'll see what happens with Delta 8.
Touche. Right.
But hey, I've got 700 jars of Delta 8 gummies if anybody wants it.
Right.
But yeah, so it's I like Delta 8 because it helps me sleep, but also my CBD and cannabinoid line consists of THCV products, CBG products, Delta 8, and CBD.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so I have and lots of terpenes. I have it's hard to believe it. It's been 5 years, but in the 5 years that I've worked with caregivers, because I am a caregiver, I came up through the caregiver ranks,
Yeah.
and I was fortunate to work with a lot of people with a lot of different issues and conditions, and helping them find what works for them, even if we have to make it ourselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you have to make it yourself.
Yes.
And that's why I'm an advocate for preserving caregiver rights, because and on the retail side, I know how this works. And the retail places are in it to maximize profits, and that's business.
Sure.
But if you are someone who needs this for medicinal purposes, and you're trying to access something that doesn't have a high THC count,
Right.
you're not going to find those in provisioning centers. And so I want to make sure that people will always have the option to grow it themselves if they can't find it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a delicate balance. I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole for another day. as
Oh
we
yeah,
know.
totally right. And
But
don't
to
get me
your-
wrong, growing 12 plants in your backyard, or growing 3 plants in your basement is a lot different from getting a warehouse.
Of course, that's not different. A lot
Right.
different from it's like you're
Yes.
still a caregiver, but it's like you're doing there's a whole business.
Right,
And so, but to your point, I think we're in a unique state, and more to come, folks. On that, trust me, there's a lot to watch. I think in the tea leaves and where the laws are going, because you've got a unique balance with that. You know what I mean? Having being a caregiver, having ownership in a provisioning center, having
Right.
sold it,
Well,
being a shareholder.
I'm not a caregiver anymore
But
because I
having, so
can't
having
be,
been,
right?
having been, excuse me, but with that gives you unique perspective and informs. It's
Mhm.
kind of similar to our CEO, ran the same things, was a caregiver,
Mhm.
moved to starting his own startup, and so it's gonna be an interesting dynamic. I think as we watch all this play out, and I love that you've shared that perspective that way. So
Mhm.
like, yeah, those rights still matter. It's just
Mhm.
like how when you formalize an industry, they got to coexist, and you
Right.
got to find the ways for them
Mhm.
to coexist meaningfully without one undercutting the other for its both intentional purposes and
Mhm.
sort of things. And we're a very oversaturated market right now. We know that in general,
Mhm.
it's going to be that way. And over time, things will level out. So, more to come there. Um, into the today. So you mentioned obviously you've got culture going.
Mhm.
You got the different CBD lines. You got the culture kits, which we're
Yes.
excited about as well. And the part I love that you shared earlier when you talked about the fact that cannabis. Well, sure, I'll try it. Right. All you know is from the outside looking in, though, and there's the stigma that exists around it. Is this thing work? You mentioned devices, social equity, and I love to get your definition of it. When you think about when you do, how do you define social equity? I mean, I've seen it mean everything from it's multifaceted.
Mhm.
Everything from what the governments, states, regulators should be doing to quote unquote level the playing field,
Mhm.
right? For folks that are disproportionately advantaged or impacted to get involved in the industry, to the legislation, the advocacy work, the reform work that has to happen for bodies that are still sitting in prison cells today. Because as we know, the war on drugs was not applied equally. It was a
Right.
war on people, namely black and brown folks from
Mhm.
communities of color. That's just a fact
Right.
and is well known.
Mhm.
And with that kind of backdrop, social equity has become our term of art, our DE&I
Mhm.
motivator and our driver. But, that's, forget my diatribe on it. How would you define social equity?
Layman's terms, the people get a cut.
Hmm.
Social, people, equity, cut.
I like it. I like it.
Where's my pie?
I like it. I like it.
So, but and it means but what does that cut look like?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what a lot of states and
That's what causes
cities,
this.
right, are trying
Because a
to
lot of
figure
it's been
out.
about the cut.
Right, right.
What does it mean? What does it look
Mhm.
like? Is it enough?
Right,
Right.
it's never enough.
Right. It's never
Because you
enough.
can't
Right.
you can't and in Michigan it's complicated because Michigan can't have any race-based litigation or
Oh, no.
race-based
No. Good old Prop 2.
property. Right.
Remember those days. And so
Mhm.
because of that, right, there's an inability to even say things a certain way. I
Right.
mean, I'll never forget being in Michigan State, and we were called, racial ethnic student aides, like the minority aides in the halls. We had to change our name
Wow.
to the cultural and academic transitional aides.
Wow.
I'm sorry,
So
what?
it's like,
Say
what am I
mouthful.
again?
What do I do? What are you here for? You're here for first year students, students in transition, international
Mhm.
students, but not the brown kids. Can't say that. Cool, right?
Okay,
And
right.
so,
Right.
but the point is that you're right. It makes that difficult, and that's another backdrop that complicates when we think about social equity in the state. But I
Mhm.
love how you phrase that.
Mhm.
People
Right.
get a cut.
Yeah.
But that cut varies.
Mhm.
One thing we've had a unique approach to taking on. So obviously, I came into the company with my role being director of social equity. I'm a lawyer by trade, but I've done a lot of work in DE&I spaces and public service through Wolverine Bar Association and ABA, and you name it for the years. So I love to blend that day job aspect to it. But I think we can make no bones about it that the businesses that we're in are for profit
Oh,
industries,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? But you got to do well, right?
Mhm. To
So
do
you can
good.
do good, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what we've taken is that. But you can't forget to do well because if you don't,
Right.
I
You can't
mean,
do good.
if people come work for their families can't put food on the table and that type of
Mhm.
thing, we can't do anything. So you have to have that mindset. But we dropped our social equity plan, and one of the first things we look at, like the latter three I was mentioning, because those are pretty obvious: education, so educating your people with life
Mhm.
skills, educating the market around you. The third pillar, legislation, advocacy. That's the reform work. Getting bodies out of sales. Last person to project partner with them, and then the last one, good neighbor. That's the visible
Mhm.
stuff, right? Oh, you're going to go in the community, you're going to support them with your
Right.
efforts. But it's the first one I come back to is called access to value chain or participation. And I
Mhm.
like it's that cut term you use
Mhm.
because we're kind of unique as being a vertically integrated operator. We've got all the channels. We got cultivation, we got processing, we've got retail stores with the hopes to bring more online. So naturally, our best way to create the cut is employment,
Mhm.
right? And that's what we're trying to be more intentional about what the jobs are. Indeed and LinkedIn are great, but they're inherently biased too,
Right.
right? So it's
Mhm.
trying to take the jobs, as you would say, to the people
Right.
to help them sort of get the cut. Everyone's got their own angle, and I think it's important everybody recognize carry my pail of water,
Mhm.
right? Because none of us is quote unquote responsible for the war on drug. I think we've got to be careful of that, especially in the black and brown community.
Mhm.
We see this where sometimes it's like, ain't none of us over there, ain't no owners and all, and it's
Right.
like, but
Mhm.
let's just be honest, pure point blank fact. If you start a brand new industry tomorrow, right?
Mhm.
Whatever the industry is, who is going to be better positioned to step into said industry? Those with resources.
Right.
That's what
Mhm.
resources. Now, to break the demographic down, who disproportionately has more resources than others, right?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, community colors have less
Very few.
resources. The irony of cannabis is that not the only, but one of the key reasons why our
Mhm.
resources happen to be less in this
Mhm.
industry is because we were criminalized at a greater rate by the same industry. So that's
Mhm.
the irony of this one is it just is an exacerbated issue of the norm,
Right.
right? I mean, the
Mhm.
norm unfortunately is what it is. This one's been greater. So I do think there's an onus to pay it forward. That's
Yeah.
a blessing and a privilege to operate,
Mhm.
in this space. And
Right.
so it's on us to kind of do it. So I'm off my soapbox. Let me get off of that.
That's okay.
But with that such, I guess there's a broad definition we can say with
Mhm.
social equity. Do you think there are any misconceptions or misnomers around it that's in your face? Anything you'd like to dispel or maybe comment on, unpack when you think about people hear social equity and what they might think it is because
Sure.
it's such a multifaceted
Oh, yeah.
definition that everybody doesn't even agree on
Right.
necessarily.
Oh, yeah. So, at the risk of ruffling some feathers, I'm just going to put it out
Ruffle
there.
away.
Social equity does not mean all black folk get a dispensary. Okay. Because and also social equity doesn't mean if you're black or brown, you instantly qualify as a social equity candidate. Does not mean that because while I do a lot of work for the state and for the MICAA for social equity, I am not a social equity candidate. I do not qualify.
Right,
So,
right.
and I'm okay with that.
Right.
I don't. I didn't get caught with weed. I didn't get arrested. I live in a community that was not overly policed.
Right. The disproportionately impacted
Right,
community.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I moved here and moved 8 minutes away from the station.
Right.
So,
Right.
and where I lived in Farmington Hills, and so I'm like, wait, Farmington Hills, and like they treated my black stepsons like they treated white kids, and I will be the first to say that where I lived and when my stepsons got caught with cannabis, the cops said, dump it out
Yeah.
and go about your way.
Yeah. Right.
So, thank you. Hope I didn't get anybody in trouble for doing that.
Appreciate it.
But yeah, so but that's okay because I'm in a position to advocate for people who look like me, and who have had adverse experiences because they look like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so so if I'm in that position to make sure that there are more of us in this industry, I happily do it because I feel that not just the cannabis industry, every business should be a reflection of the community it's housed in.
Absolutely.
So, when you walk into your grocery store, you should see people who look like you.
You should. Yes. Yes.
And it's that shouldn't be that unusual. So how do we do it? And I think that's the challenge because we do have these businesses that take millions of dollars to set up. And we do have an industry that does not have access to banking, and so or at least conventional banking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So,
one of those other rabbit holes. People go,
right.
you guys can't go to banks, not the same way.
No, exactly. And so when you look at people who are like, okay, well, then I have to tap into my 401k. Well, how many of us have jobs that they can set aside money into their 401k?
Sure.
How about people like, oh, I can tap into the equity in my home? Well, we come from red line communities, and so we don't have home equity, or at least not as much home equity. First of all, if you're lucky to have a home in some of these communities, you're head and shoulders above everybody else.
Right.
But your equity is hundreds of thousands of dollars less than your fair-skinned neighbors.
Our light-skinned cousins, as we would say. Yes,
right.
indeed.
And it's not their fault. And I'm not saying,
No.
hey, this is the hand we've all been dealt. So we have to play with these cards. So let's find a way to play with these cards. I would like for social equity to, as I'm working with the state on ways to promote social equity, because there are lots of ways that you can go about doing it. But one that is not getting a lot of play, which I'm a little upset about, is to look at it in a different way. Whereas, okay, if we can't get minorities in ownership positions in companies, what else can we do to further the industry? And Director Brisboe has a great idea about trying to get more community colleges on board, having larger operators pay money into a social equity pot.
Yeah, right.
So imagine like if you're like a huge, processor or a huge cultivator, and you can set aside 0.5%
Mm-hmm.
of your gross or of your profits, and that goes into a fund, and that fund pays for community college courses that teach business, that
Right.
teach cultivation.
Cultivation. I can actually take a class above
Right.
ground and learn how to do this, not in the basement somewhere.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
How about I have places calling me. They
Teaching you life
desperately
skills. It's like a
need.
trade. You make
Right.
it a trade.
Yeah.
As it is, right?
Think about how many places are dying for compliance managers
Ooh.
right
You're trying to
now.
find unicorns. They don't exist
Right.
yet.
Exactly.
You're creating the person because
Right.
they don't quite exist. The compliance with the regulatory regime that just came out.
Right. Right. And that constantly changes.
Awesome.
It constantly changes. And so if we could, and also scholarships.
Yes.
Imagine if you don't have to pay for that college course because your mom went to prison or your dad went to prison for cannabis.
Yeah.
So no, you're a legacy. And so you're going to go to school for free and you're going to
Yeah.
learn how to do this
Yeah.
in this industry. Because we're at the point now where there is this push where the state is going to all these places and they're doing these public forums, and people are feeling that, oh, okay, great, I can go out, I can get a license, but they have no idea about how to run a
Yeah, run a business.
So it's okay. Why aren't we? Can we tap into where are all the hairdressers? I mean, because and I hate to just put everything on the hairdressers, but when you look at
Yes.
at the popular businesses in our community, you have a lot of people, a lot of women who are doing hair, and they're kicking butt in those businesses, and that's about more than doing hair.
Right.
That's managing money, managing a business, all of that. So it would be helpful if we could kind of tap into business owners who are already doing it successfully
Mm-hmm.
and sort of transition them to, hey, have you thought about this?
Yes.
Some people who already, because not everyone is cut out to run a business.
Or even inclined or want to do so.
Right.
And I love that you shared I'm a strong believer that the sender changes the reception.
Mhm.
Right. Representation matters, as we often
Mhm.
hear all the time. You get in the seat, but it's what you do with that platform.
Right.
Right. And you saying those words as a black woman
Mhm.
matters and hits differently.
Yeah.
As I might as a black man when I say certain things, and they go like, but wait, so you get to do it from the inside out.
Okay.
Right. And so you're kind of sitting at the table, so to
Mhm.
speak, right? But then you can share that perspective. I know it hears different. And you mentioned at the risk of ruffling feathers, ruffle away.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, that's the truth behind it. Because that's in any industry. I think we focus so much on the fact of ownership, but we pull that percentage out. Not to say that can't be or shouldn't be improved, right?
Mhm.
There's, throughout the entire org chart, there needs to be representation.
Right.
At every level. Because it's only going to be of any one company, one CEO,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
One group of board members and shareholders. That's it, right? And there's only so many seats, so to speak, at those respective tables. However, that doesn't mean you stop there and say, "Oh, can't own the whole thing, so just
Right.
give up."
Mhm.
No, guess what? We need lawyers, right? We need finance folks. We need HR people. We need people throughout the entire org chart. And one way of doing that, the pipeline. So I love you mentioned education. Education is really important because if you can teach this as a skill, as a trade, as you're at the community college, I can actually learn this thing. And if that's maybe being helped and funded from the operator, so you actually preempted something I was going to ask you about what things, how can operators maybe help and do differently? Because we're making progress as a state, and I think it's a combination of what the state requires of operators, which is bare minimum floor,
Right. Yeah.
versus as an operator what you choose to do, right? And I personally, and we think personally, it's incumbent on all of us to do above that because that's just what somebody else told us to do.
Right.
Again, what should we be doing the best we can? Again, do well, do good though, and how can we improve that? And I love that education concept. Man, it makes so much sense because it's building the pipeline. These are people that are going to work their way into your doors one day because, the application floods open. You got a position for what? Right?
But do you guys
And
get a
that's
lot of
cool.
applications? Because I remember when we
Yeah.
were looking,
Yeah.
it was so, and then trying to find, applicants of color.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge.
I was like, where are the black people?
It's a challenge. And the thing about it is it's about, which roles, right? If we have a cultivation associate position that comes online versus a retail establishment, right? And so, it just the nature of the role is going to change who you're getting in the door, and then what's a transferable skill set? Because at the end of the day, if you're a sales associate, bud tender, sales guy, whatever you want to call it, you got to know how to have good customer service skills and work with people.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, you know what I mean, what race, color, creed you are. Can you do that thing? Do you have that skill set, right? Some of the cultivation associate roles are very similar to what you might find manufacturing roles and plants, right? It can be, repeat type of jobs over and over again. Can you work in that setting? Can you work consistently? Can you maintain quality? That type of thing. it ain't for everybody.
Right.
And that's the thing about it, is that. But just because it's not doesn't mean we can't find no black people.
Right.
We can't find. Of course you can. I think it's mentioned earlier about being intentional. It's one thing we try to do. Look internally. Okay, whatever we're doing, we need to do more. We're not doing enough. How do we do better at even trying to take jobs to the community? We know where they are getting posted, but whose eyes are on them? Right. There's the inherent technological access gaps. Right. So because of that, it's on Indeed. Well, not everybody has Indeed, or unfortunately isn't even inclined to look. Right. And so we've tried to be more intentional. Find community orgs and let them know, hey, we too have a position now. We started a partnership with 70 Million Jobs, which is basically for felon-friendly positions. And so the cool part about, I think our industry is that it's a scarlet letter a lot of times if you have a conviction, right? Good luck going to the Big 3 plant and getting a job. Whereas in this industry, not saying, but come on over here with all the felonies you want in the world, right? However, it may not be a scarlet letter, particularly if it's drug-related, cannabis-related, possession charge, you've paid your debt to society, so to speak. There's no reason that the recidivism is so high is because reentering citizens can't find jobs. Right. So if they can find somewhere, and sometimes these are quote unquote your best employees because they know the challenge. Like I've got friends of mine that have records and they're like, it's hard, man. And I hate checking that box. And I know I check the box, I'm probably not hearing back. Right. Right. And if I do, that's going to be in their mind the entire time. So that type of work is what we're trying to focus more on. Again, create the pipeline because that's the opportunities we do have to provide. Again, we only got so many positions of ownership, so to speak. And to your point, it doesn't mean oust every owner that ain't black and get them out of there. It's like no, that's short sighted. But the long term is every time somebody comes in now they've got a full-time job, career, benefits, healthcare. That's a generational change for that individual, their families, right? That may have never happened, especially might break a generational curse if they, as you mentioned earlier, maybe had parents that were incarcerated, things of that nature. So definitely points noted about what operators think can do more. One final thing I'll touch on as we start to wrap down to a close is how would you recommend people can get involved in the cause of social equity? So obviously these are people that may or may not be in the industry, but may just be passionate about it. Maybe you want to, advance the cause of social equity and its purpose, its true purpose, as we sort of unpacked here today. How would you recommend folks can get involved?
The easiest way I would say is join Am I Normal? It's they're an advocacy group. I'm a board member of an industry association. So if you're licensed and you're in the industry, sure, join us at MICIA. We'd love to have you. Yes. But if not, if you are at home and you're like, this is wrong. That we've suffered a lot, and if you want to affect some change, please by all means join us at Am I Normal, and that's NOM. They're RL, right? National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Yes. So it's not spelled like normal. It's something.
So basically, normal with no A, right?
There you go. Right.
Okay. I was even gonna say when I say pleasantries, I go pleasantries 2 E's. I always go that, and they go like, oh, okay, cool. And it's like,
it's like normal, but National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. But because we have even though cannabis is legal for adult use here in Michigan, there are some things we're still working on. Yeah. I feel that it's wrong that places still test for cannabis. I remember going to work on a cornucopia of pharmaceuticals. Everything from I was on baclofen, Flexeril, Adderall. They threw some Prozac in there.
You got a whole cocktail going in. It's like, let's toss it in.
And no one ever tested me for those medications.
Right. And you're like, arguably, my quote unquote impairment would be greater than this person just trying. You sure you won't test me? You're like,
right. And I'm not saying that people should go to work intoxicated or under the influence of anything.
Sure.
But I will tell you that of the people and populations that I work with, I work with people who are mostly over 45, 50, 60, 70. And these are people who just don't want to be in pain. Who actually want to work and want to be able to go to work and not be in pain.
Right.
And so you'll find, and the studies have shown that adult use communities have a 30% reduction in workplace injuries and also workman's comp. Workman's comp claims decrease. Which
every employer and HR department loves to hear.
Right, you would think. So stop. Obviously, if someone comes into work and you can tell that they are obviously under the influence of something, that's not right. But I have a lot of people who use cannabis to sleep. And we know that insomnia is huge.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
if you are using a gummy to go to sleep at night so you can get up and have a good day the next day,
Yeah.
you shouldn't run the risk of losing your job because of that.
Yeah.
And when I look at the fact that we had, we call our medical professionals, heroes. They've been on the front lines for this last year or whatever, and they have been inundated. If anybody needs a gummy, I would say it's some doctors and some
Especially if you had to go out there and fight the whole coronavirus by yourself.
Right, exactly.
The least thing we can do is get you with a proper gummy. We'll be waiting
Right.
on the table for you when you get back.
Have a puff. Maybe you have a
Exactly.
puff. I mean, my gosh, you're no longer under the influence after
No.
a couple of hours.
And that's where I think we're at an interesting point. And I think all of this, when you bring it home, it dovetails right back around to social equity.
Mhm.
Because social equity is naturally like, yes, giving the people their cut. When you give the people their cut, give them some education with it, give them some information with it. And
Right.
that education information is back to dispelling the myths.
Mhm.
A lot of the reason people have negative things to say is we're quickly dismissive.
Right.
Oh, well, no. Well, why?
Right.
That reefer. Why?
Mhm.
Right? Why? And then they can't tell you necessarily. Well, it's because, I mean, I go back and look at some of the ads. It's always funny, some like the Dare ads from the 80s
Oh,
and
yeah.
whatnot. And it was like, and Steve got high on and then he went on like a maniacal killing spree. And it's like Steve with a knife. And I'm like, really?
Nope, didn't
really?
happen.
That
Was
Steve
Steve
didn't do
on-
that.
on
Steve was
meth?
high. Steve was on meth and coke at the same time. Maybe a little PCP, but I'm telling you.
Right.
No, and so the point is like that takeaway is back to the education, right?
Mm-hmm.
And social equity, I think as we advance these causes, right, it's not forgetting to educate and unpack these things along the way as you're giving totally these pieces of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone focuses on the financial side. And the last thing I'll mention there is you can't conflate the part about the advocacy and the criminal justice reform. They are mutually exclusive. Sometimes
Right.
people assume that, well, to figure out the industry, you can't let anybody out of prison yet. Yes, you sure
Right,
can.
You definitely
It
can.
has nothing to do with that,
Right.
And so like the Michael Thompsons of the world who just got out, right, and incredible story. There's a lot more Michael Thompsons.
Absolutely.
And we need to continue to advocate and push for that and not let that get blended in with the, well, until we figure out the banking laws. Like, no, figure out the banking laws. Figure out that part. Figure out federal deregulation too. Yes. However, let people out yesterday.
Right.
There's no excuse for that.
And preserve our gun rights, by the way. saying.
Come on now. See, now you preempted me. I was just going to lead you. I was going to say, like, is there any parting thoughts you want to leave us with? They can be social equity, they can be otherwise. You are a wealth of information, and it's been an absolute joy having you. So I'm sure that there's more you've got on the mind, and hopefully not our last time doing this. But anything you want to leave us with in the context of social equity, cannabis advocacy, just the floor is yours.
I would say, please join us at Culture Club at the end of the month, every month, because we have a free educational event.
Nice.
We have a tea party, and but it's an online tea party. You can drink tea or wine or whatever, and but we pick a topic and we discuss it with a nurse. And so we have a cannabis nurse. All of my tea parties feature Kathleen Graham, and Kathleen Graham is a cannabis nurse. She won Americans for Safe Access Educator of the Year a few years ago. She's a hospice nurse and palliative nurse by trade and experience, but she is a wealth of information when it comes to cannabis. And so I always tell people, unfortunately, if you spend 5 or 10 minutes on projectcbd.org, you will know more about cannabis for health than your doctor, which is unfortunate. But I like having Kathleen there because she's one of the few people in the medical profession who has learned a lot about cannabis and is willing to help people navigate how to use it for their particular condition. So this month, it's next Wednesday, it's the 26th of the May 26th is Wednesday at 7 o'clock. But every month is the last Thursday of every month.
Okay.
Usually, it's not this Thursday this month because that's my anniversary.
Oh, well, we're not getting,
So
we're not
I
getting
can't
away
do
with
it.
that.
Yeah. So
And it's Culture Club,
.com.
QULTURE.
Mhm.
C.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, make sure it's not
Yeah.
club with a Q too. 'Cause,
Right, I know, it's too little
I'm big
talk.
on alliteration, so
I
I'd be
am
like
too,
Culture Club,
right.
and I'd be doing too much. And like Jerome, that's not, doesn't exist. You can't
Right.
find the website. Awesome. So
Yeah.
please, everyone, join Culture Club. These are incredible events. I mean, that's part of that education. That's part of that dispelling myths and rumors because people will say, I've heard something somewhere, but to be able to come in and listen to a cannabis nurse break these things down for you, I can ask what I thought might be a dumb question, or I
Right.
couldn't find that question, kind of find the answer for it anywhere, to have a safe space to go do that. So thank you for doing that. That's part of advancing this ball, right?
Thank
And using your platform in the way in which you do. So it's been an absolute joy having you. Had an intriguing and fun and lively conversation. We've had an absolute blast. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for another episode of Pleasant Talks. Don't forget to like us, follow us, subscribe to us on all our channels, and stay on top of all future content for this podcast and otherwise. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Q, thank you again for
Thank you.
coming. Thank you for joining us, having a blast. So everyone else, be blessed and stay pleasant.